All right, ladies and gentlemen, a special guest, of course, Jon Rappoport. You haven't heard him on our station, but we have him here today to talk a little bit about these tests and what's going on with the coronavirus tests. And are these things really approved for diagnostics? And Jon, welcome to the show. And I know you got a limited amount of time, but we were going to talk about that. Just go ahead and say whatever you like, my friend.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, the test is called the PCR test. That's the most widespread test that's been used to diagnose so-called COVID-19. And that polymerase chain reaction is the full name. And it supposedly takes a very, very tiny sample of tissue from a patient and blows it up many, many times so that it can be observed. But if you look at the official literature even on this from the FDA, the World Health Organization, the test kit manufacturers, they admit, for example, that a positive test, meaning for the virus, does not necessarily indicate the definite cause of disease. So that right away throws a giant monkey wrench into the whole idea of the test. And then we have the fact also admitted by a test kit manufacturer that the test will test positive on irrelevant factors that have nothing to do with the purported COVID-19 virus, such as a number of other viruses, including another coronavirus for SARS, which was supposed to be the epidemic of choice in 2003. So that is also introducing another giant monkey wrench into this because, of course, if somebody says, okay, you tested positive, that could mean, yeah, you had one of any number of irrelevant viruses or bacteria in your body that have nothing to do with anything. So that's another factor that is readily admitted in the literature. And these kinds of statements in the literature just simply preclude the idea that even in their own terms, and by they I mean CDC, World Health Organization, preclude that this test is really useful at all, while of course they claim that it is fantastically useful. But at bottom, here is what could be called the main shortcoming or flaw, fatal flaw of the PCR test, and that is it purports to be able to say how much virus is in the person's body that's being tested. This is called quantitative PCR. Now, behind the scenes, there has been a kind of silent debate over the years as to whether this is actually true. And why is that important? Because in order to be able to even begin to talk about a virus causing disease in a person, you have to show that there are millions and millions and millions of that virus actively replicating in the person's body. A few little tiny fragments of virus particles are not going to do anything. And so naturally the proponents of the PCR test say, oh yeah, we can do that, we can do that. And that is completely unproven, absolute fraud, scientific nonsense. And I recently proposed in writing a vetting of the PCR test, which should have been done before it was ever marketed as quantitative to begin with, but was never done. And it would go this way. In a controlled test, you would take 500 people. And some would be sick and some would be well, from different causes. And samples of tissue would be removed from these people, let's say lung tissue or nasal swabs and that sort of thing. And they would be safely transported to a lab where the testers would never meet the patients, know who they were, the whole thing would be blinded, and you would say to the testers, okay, here's what we want you to do. In each case, you identify the virus that is in this patient, and two, how much of the virus is in the patient, which you say you can do. And then the testers run the test on these 500 patients, and they say, okay, all right, so tell us which patients had the so-called COVID-19 virus and how much virus in each case. And they say, well, in patients 6, 17, 35, 142, et cetera, we found A, the coronavirus, and B, very, very much of the coronavirus. Very good. All right. Let's unblind those particular patients now and see if they are sick or well right now. Because if, as you say, in these particular patients there's a whole lot of virus that you found that's actively replicating in their bodies, they should be sick. Or are they running marathons? Let's check on it. Let's see. And this has never been done to vet the accuracy of the test in being meaningful whatsoever. Never been done. It's an enormous scandal that it's never been done. It will never be done. The proponents of the quantitative PCR will go on and on. You don't understand what we're talking about. You have no idea. The technical language is too difficult for you. We know we can do this in the lab, blah, 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 blah. But I'm not talking about in the lab, and I'm not talking about their technical voodoo language. I'm talking about in the real world where people are ill or they're well. That's where the test has never been vetted. So to propose this test, to use it, to claim that it has reliable results, and to base the case numbers of COVID-19 on this test, which then leads to the lockdowns, the economic vast destruction, the social distancing, the changing of human culture around the world through this idea of suspicion and hostility of your fellow human. All of this insanity is completely unwarranted, and these people should be in prison. And that's my brief analysis of the test.
Excellent. And that's from March 30th on nomorefakenews.com, Jon's website and his blog. I read it every day, Jon. I may miss a day, but then I have to catch up and all these things. But just excellent material. Kerry Mullison, probably talked to him before, the late Kerry Mullison. He passed away just several months ago, which is a shame because he would be ripping this right now himself. He was given the Nobel Prize for inventing this test, ladies and gentlemen, and he called quantitative PCR tests an oxymoron. He said, no, you can't determine any of this stuff from a quantitative PCR test. And it shouldn't be used. And as Jon says, the CDC, World Health Organization, FDA, and even one of the test makers have claimed this is not a diagnostic tool that's a gold standard. Isn't that the bottom line there, Jon?
Yes, and far from it. If you read closely their literature and their quotes, it's not a gold standard. But at the same time, public health authorities refer to it as a gold standard. So you have this internal contradiction. In the scientific brand of literature that these public health agencies put out, they admit the lethal flaws in the test. But on the propaganda front, in the press, with the President of the United States and various other countries, leaders, and so forth, they trumpet the accuracy of the test.
They sure do, and they scare people to death with it, too. They scare entire nations, and now we're into this huge lockdown that's going on here because of this test that isn't really valid, ladies and gentlemen. Think about this. It all comes down to this test. Everything is about what's really being tested here. And now Jon has been so bold and done the homework and dug up these quotes to prove that these people don't really have a gold standard test to begin with. And, as it's never been proved, it's never been control sampled, just as Jon explained with these patients and things like that, to determine if the test was actually valid. Now, it may be a surrogate marker. Okay, so that's okay. But at the other hand, here you have all these people hiding in their houses now because of something that we say we're testing for. And there's enough problems with the viral hypothesis with COVID-19 anyway. But now you see the test isn't even working, and all of this is being used to terrorize you here in the United States and all around the world. Is that about the scope of it, Jon?
Yeah, that's the scope of it for sure.
Right
there.
And I know you're busy. You got any other points you want to make real quick here, because we've got a great audience, and we do appreciate your work, sir. I just want to thank you so much. Any other points you want to make real quick?
Well, sure. Yeah, I mean, this is a subject for, at length, a pounding, which I have been doing in my articles.
Yeah.
But the main hypnotic illusion here with this so-called pandemic and others is always the same, which is we're talking about one disease condition with one cause.
Right. Yep.
And so people buy into that right away. Okay, well, they have a name for it. It must be one condition all over the world, and it's got the same cause everywhere. And now we can argue about where that cause came from, the virus, oh no, it wasn't the bats, and it was this, it wasn't the seafood market, it was this, and that. But forget all that. The basic hypothesis is false.
Right.
It's a piece of hypnotism that is used very, very successfully to bind people to the idea that no, we're not corralling people with many different conditions under one umbrella term called COVID-19. We would never think of doing that. In every case where there's a person who's sick that we label COVID-19, this is a unique condition caused by a unique virus, which is a total lie. They know it's a total lie. They are hiding behind the lie. This is, for example, let's take New York, for example. The propaganda is herding every elderly person living in an apartment in New York into hospitals. These people are already suffering from long-term lung conditions like pneumonia, flu, TB, you name it, lung conditions with no names. And they've been treated for years and years with highly toxic medical drugs, and they're not well at all. And now add on top of that the fear and the terror that maybe they think they have this new virus which is lethal and is going to kill them. So what are they going to do? They're going to arrive on crutches and wheelchairs, on foot, in cars and ambulances at the hospitals in New York. And they're going to say, what's the matter with me? Do I have the virus? And so you get where you actually do get the phenomenon of overflowing hospitals and ICU wards, it is because of this, not because the virus is driving them there. And so many of them are presumptively diagnosed just on eyeballs alone. Okay, you're probably a case of COVID and this, that, and the other thing, and so on and so forth. And these people die from the conditions that they already had, plus fear, plus incorrect use of ventilators, which cause bacterial pneumonia, plus isolation, plus toxic antiviral drugs in some cases. And it's all being trumpeted as, no, it's one condition with one unique cause. Absolutely not. You could go around the world and look at different populations. You look at Wuhan, China, and you're talking about highly poisonous air quality that has been causing pneumonia, which is called the cardinal feature of the new epidemic. Pneumonia for decades and decades. About 300,000 people in China die every year from pneumonia. So there in Wuhan, you'd be looking at something else. So what we're looking at here, and this is the thing that people find it the most difficult to detach from, is this central lie that it must be one new condition with one new cause. It ain't that, it's never been that, it's never going to be that. And once you unhook yourself from that, you can begin to look at what's actually going on and the construction of an illusion.
Absolutely. You know, Jon's research goes back 5 years before I started this. I started in 1992, and he wrote a book called AIDS Incorporated. He's been doing this great work all these years. And, you know, I remember that press conference with Margaret Heckler when she said, we have found the probable cause of AIDS. Now, she didn't say a probable cause of AIDS, right? It's always the germ. the cause, the problem. Everything else is eliminated, right? And look where that went. Just a disaster. Of course, all of our experts on the show today are people who we're the A team of people who've been looking at these phony frauds for years, John. And this is another one, and this is the most outrageous of them all, in my opinion.
It is indeed, because look at the devastation, the economic devastation around the world, and the psychological and spiritual implications here. Now, later, when it's over, whatever, that people are going to be looking at each other with suspicion, hostility. So many people are being roped into this whole thing. They're snitching. There's now a new snitch culture where people are snitching on their neighbors, calling 911. Our neighbor next door has been coughing. Medical team arrives. I mean, it's completely insane. And it's changing things. And there are other strategies in the works here as to what this is going to be all about. I mean, this is an entree into a brave new world of technocracy. And I've been writing about this. It's too long a story to get into right here. But this whole business of the lockdowns, the putting populations under basically house arrest, the economic and financial destruction in all of this is going to be used as a lever and a springboard for saying we have to build a different world now. And it's going to be a world where we're going to try to make sure this doesn't happen again. That's going to be one of the spearheads of propaganda hype that is going to be used to usher in a whole new engineered world where, just to begin the conversation, wall-to-wall surveillance will be very visible and public and omnipresent. So that's a whole other subject for another time.
Yeah, it is. And we'll have to have you back. Exit from the Matrix on his website, Power Outside the Matrix. Jon teaches you high school level logic and analysis stuff that's just vital to understanding these things. And Jon, I do appreciate you taking the time to come on. And we'll have to have you back. I know you're a very busy man. But his website is nomorefakenews.com. That article about the testing is March 30th. He keeps you up to date. You can follow it every day. Get on his email list. Jon, any more words before you go?
No, that's it. And I just want to thank you for having, the courage and the space and time to put this whole thing together and to give an opportunity for other reasonable voices to be heard. And I appreciate that very much.
Well, it's my pleasure, and we have people like you and so many others on our panel here today. And we're going to be doing more of this, ladies and gentlemen, because we got to fight. It's like Jon says, this is 1984. Well, thanks, Jon. We sure appreciate it. We'll get back with you soon, and keep up the good work, buddy.
Absolutely. You too. Thank you.